This is a Rough Tiger production.
And you, and you, and you, and you were there. Some of it wasn't very nice, but most of it was beautiful.
Recording in
Greetings.
progress. Hey, Bryan. Hey, everybody.
Howdy.
Welcome to Dream Idiots. And we're back.
We have returned.
This
Triumphantly? Something? I don't fucking, whatever.
This episode will drop on May 2nd. We have a silent co-host here today. The new member of our household, a Great Dane pup named Kara, who is trying to find a comfortable space under my desk to quietly, I think, chew my shoelaces. Thanks for letting us have that time off, folks. It was a pretty stressful 3 weeks for me, at least. Bryan, how are you doing?
I'm fine. Yeah, probably less stressful for me, but good to get refreshed. And I think we're going to be good to go here for a good long while. And may the second be with you. As I used to, we had a college friend who was a huge Star Wars fan, and whenever the third or fifth would roll around, I would bastardize the whole "May the Fourth be with you" bullshit. And I would butcher the date, and I would laugh, and they would never laugh. But
you'll need to tell me off. You'll need to tell me off air who that was, because that's pretty funny. I have a guess, but right. So we've got some updates before we get started. Back into the swing of things here. Bryan, you have a few, and I have one. So go ahead. You take the lead, and I'll.
Well, first of all, I was going to say, yeah, thanks for listening and doing all those things that you're doing for us, and please keep doing it. You can listen to us on every single platform. Like and rate and subscribe. Shoot us a review if you can or you want. We're at Dream Idiots on Facebook, Dream Idiots on Instagram. Email us at dreamidiotspodcast@gmail.com and let us know what you think. Give us a curse word you want us to offer up, maybe, or whatever you want. You had one that update you said. You want to go ahead and do that?
I can. Are you done with your updates, or is that it?
Well, I had one.
Oh, you're gonna do before your story. Okay.
No, I should. We're so disorganized today. It's like we're doing this for the first time. Yeah, I can go ahead and do mine. A few weeks ago, not that long ago, we talked about Bessie Coleman.
Right.
Bessie Coleman was the first African-American, first Native American woman to earn her pilot's license. Got her license in 1921, actually 2 years before Amelia Earhart. Born and raised in poverty in Texas, she had traveled to Chicago with one or more siblings, and then she got this crazy idea that she was going to travel to Paris to get her pilot license there, because no one in America would teach a black woman how to fly. So got her pilot's license and became an aviatrix and barnstormer in this country, and became quite popular. And she was, it was sort of marvelous, considering this is 100 years ago, very, very early 1920s, that she would refuse to perform if it was a white only crowd. She would only perform to mixed crowds. So a brave stance to take, considering how long ago that fucking was. White folks only, yeah, I'm not going on. So a friend of the pod, Marvin, actually emailed in this story a few weeks ago, and I meant to include it earlier. There is a third grader named Alex Williams, African-American girl. In third grade, you are what, 8 years old, 9 years old, somewhere in there?
Sure.
And she was tasked to do a presentation on who her hero was. And she told her teacher, well, Bessie Coleman is my hero. And she was told that, quote, Bessie is no hero, and wouldn't you rather do Harriet Tubman or Maya Angelou? I can't imagine telling a little girl, no, she's not your hero. Sorry. And she was obviously an angry kid. Her mother was just as angry. Her mother actually coincidentally works for the FAA, of all things. Called in and blew a gasket. And Alex went ahead and prepared a presentation on Bessie Coleman, but was not called to present because for some reason it was deemed inappropriate. But her mother complained enough, and eventually Alex was invited to do her presentation to members of the school board, and was, very obviously very warmly received. And she was given a new Betsy Coleman Barbie doll and one of the newly minted Betsy Coleman quarters. So,
very cool. Where did this happen?
I would have to look again. In the news story, I was watching a video on it, and it didn't say, it wasn't immediately clear where this was. I think it was in Chicago, of all places, which doesn't really make any sense. But
why would you not want her to do it?
Yeah, what? I mean,
okay,
kind of. How bizarre is that? But she was asked, basically, what's your advice, or what's your takeaway from this experience? And Alex said, "You don't have to take no for an answer."
Lesson well learned. Very nice.
I kind of like that.
Well, thank you, friend of the pod, Marvin, for sending that in. That's what we like to hear from our listeners. That's great. And thank you for your update, Brian.
Yep.
I've got one. As I said prior to our little hiatus, I was taking care of all the attendant things that occur when someone passes away. And I've been going through old photographs and whatnot that were at my mother's house, and I've been organizing them and figuring out what to keep and what not to keep. And I found a whole bunch of newspaper clippings, Brian, and I want you to cast your mind back to the episode we did about my childhood friend and pro baseball player, Mike Coolbaugh.
Sure.
He was not my childhood friend and a pro baseball player at the same time, because that would be a hell of a story.
That would have been
he
weird,
became a pro baseball player. And I talked about how we faced off in the 5th grade spelling bee, and I beat him only to go on and lose on the very first word in the next round.
Which was banana
next
or
level.
something.
It was door jam, actually. Door jam. And I found a clipping from a newspaper that had a story about kids progressing to the next level, and my picture was actually in the paper with my name under it, saying heading on to the city round or whatever it was.
This dumbass.
That's all it needed was, and who knew that this little asshole would miss door jam on the first round? So I thought that was pretty funny, going through all those photos. And I found some old pictures of Mike when we were playing YMCA basketball and some stuff. So that was kind of neat, going through those photos.
That's funny.
I have a story today that you may be familiar with. This guy. I don't know, but it's kind of important given some of the stuff that's been going on with how we think about what it means to be a citizen and what it means to be a person. Have you ever heard of William J. Sidis? S-I-D-I-S.
William J. Sidis.
He's almost a Sidaris, but not quite. S-I-D-I-S.
No idea.
His name is a palindrome, which is almost as cool. A palindrome is almost like a prime number, almost as cool as a prime number. Let's talk about William James Sidis. He was born April 1st, which we'll play into the story in a little bit, 1898, New York, to a seemingly intelligent and overbearing set of parents. His mother's maiden name was Mandelbaum. She was Sarah Sidis, and she was a physician, which at the turn of the century was pretty impressive. That there was a woman physician, and her husband and William James's dad was Boris Sidis. He was a psychiatrist. So he had a psychiatrist and a physician for parents. Boris had studied with the great philosopher, the great American philosopher, William James. And Boris was so taken by this mentor of his that he named his young son after his friend. So that's how William James got his name, William James Sidis. And he was also his godfather. So this kid is born into a whole lot of pressure. Physician, psychiatrist, and your godfather is one of the great thinkers of American culture, William James. However, he lived up to this. He was extremely intelligent young man. He reportedly was reading by the age of 18 months.
Holy shit.
And by the age of 8, the ancient age of 8, he had fluency in Latin, Greek, Russian, Turkish, Armenian, French, German, and Hebrew. At some point, he also created his own language, which he called Vendergood. Now, I don't know much about this language, from what I've read about it, it seems like it was an attempt to kind of simplify a language along the lines of, say, Esperanto, right, to where most people could use it. It obviously didn't take off because I'm guessing you've never heard of Vendergood.
I have not.
Yeah, Vendergood, Vendergood. So when they measured his IQ, some sources that I've read give it as being somewhere between 250 and 300 points on your standard IQ testing. So according to this standard testing, he is quite possibly the smartest person to have ever lived, was William James Sidis. I don't know exactly how these IQ tests work. Seems like a lot, but you know, who am I to? I'm sorry, I'm distracted by watching what my new puppy's doing. Okay. His chief amusement at this time, he didn't play with a lot of other kids. His chief amusement at this time was going on streetcar rides, trolley car rides with his parents. And he loved studying the timetables, where the stations were located, things like that. The little transfer tickets you got to move between trolley cars going different parts of the city. So he memorized the stations, the hours, when they would, you know, what stations had trains running on what time. He memorized all of that at a very young age. Now, he received disappointment at the age of 9 because Harvard said no. He wanted to apply to Harvard. Harvard said no. But after a year of study at Tufts, at a year of study at Tufts, he had to settle for Tufts. That was his second choice. He took a little time there, and he was finally admitted to Harvard at the age of 11. And Harvard simply said, 9 is too young. You're very smart, yes, but 9 is too young. 11 apparently is okay. He was graduated in 1914 at the age of 16 with a Bachelor of Arts. And he had actually lectured his first semester there on a variety of mathematical topics, including something called four-dimensional bodies, and even some metaphysical subjects during his first semester. But he suffered what we can call just a general breakdown, and he became very shy afterwards. He had talked to some reporters, and he is quoted as saying, quote, "I want to live the perfect life. And the only way to live that perfect life is to live it in seclusion." He went on to teach geometry and freshman math courses. And the geometry he taught was both Euclidean and non-Euclidean. And the difference between those, of course, is you teach with pants and without pants. Few people know that. No, he went on to teach at what eventually would become Rice University in Houston, Texas. So he moved all the way from the East Coast down to Houston to teach it at Rice in its infancy. But he was a 17-year-old graduate student and teaching assistant. And you take the typical track. I mean, I did this, but I was doing it at 23, where you teach undergraduates the basic courses, and then you take your graduate courses. He hated the experience, and after a year returned to New England. He enrolled at Harvard Law. And he studied there until 1919, where he left as a student in good standing. So he didn't graduate, but he wasn't kicked out either. He was kind of held in stasis there. So he was arrested in Boston in 1919 on May 1st. And we all know May 1st to be, and of course it's yesterday as of the day this will drop, but it's May Day. Right. We talked about this in the Alamo. Of course, it's a day where international workers celebrate. He was caught carrying a Soviet flag and a smaller American flag in his breast pocket, and professed that he had been a conscientious objector to World War I and believed that the troubles of the world were caused by capitalism. Furthermore, a socialist approach to government was the best. And that's essentially why he was arrested for inciting a riot, I suppose. And that's what he was sentenced to. He was sentenced to 18 months for doing so. His parents circumvented this sentence by holding him in the New Hampshire sanatorium they ran. So they said, he's our son, he's a little sick, so we'll take care of him. We'll put him in this sanatorium we have. And then about a year into that, they moved him to California, and he spent another year out there in similar conditions. Okay, so we don't agree with what you're saying or how you're saying it. You're clearly smart.
Obviously, you're unwell, and we must. Right.
But let's put you in. Let's put you in a hospital for a while. He returned to the East Coast in 1921, but he avoided the Boston area for fear of rearrest over the May Day incident 2 years earlier. So he moved from town to town, subsisting on various menial jobs. He popped up again in 1923, working in a New York office, but before reporters could corner him, he vanished again. It wasn't until 1926 that he popped up. this time thanks to a Philadelphia vanity press company. And you remember vanity press, what vanity presses do?
No.
Vanity presses are basically, I have a book, but no one will publish it. Can I self-publish my book with you?
Oh,
And
right,
for a
okay,
fee,
right,
they
right,
will
okay.
publish your book. So he published a book called Notes on the Collections of Transfers, and it was written under the name Frank Falupa, which might be one of my favorite pseudonyms ever. Falupa was one of the many pseudonyms Sidis employed in order to remain in seclusion. The book's subject reflected his love of riding the trolleys as a child with his parents. It was a detailed examination of transfer slips and schedules of trolley cars. He coined the term, and this is a tough one that you have to watch how you say it, paradromophile.
Paradromophile, okay.
Paradromophile.
And he also discovered fallopian tubes? No.
No. The term paradromophile describes a person obsessed with transportation research, history of transportation, and in particular, streetcar/trolley car systems.
Huh.
So in a way, it's kind of like what train spotters in the UK do, I guess,
Mhm.
where you take note of the different engines and so
Sure.
forth. He was also interested in Native American history. He wrote 2 books, one under the pseudonym of John Shattuck called Settlement of the Americas, another called The Tribes and the States. And this was about the relationship between Native American culture and democracy. And his basic argument was that, from what I've read and understand of the books, I've not read these books, was that Native American culture had so many aspects of democracy that have worked longer than the supposed democracy that came with European settlers.
Right, sure.
None other than Buckminster Fuller, who was a classmate from Harvard. He was a huge fan of Sidis's work of cosmological importance. He had written a book called The Animate and the Inanimate, and I'm not even going to try to describe what this is. But what Sidis does here is he tackles such minor, paltry subjects as the origins of the cosmos and the second law of thermodynamics. So his interests ran from the mundane to the cosmos itself, right?
Uh-huh.
From the ridiculous to the sublime. And the number of books that he wrote and the number of pseudonyms he used are unknown. Quite possibly he wrote hundreds of books under hundreds of different names. No one really knows.
And they were all published because using a vanity press, you could just walk in, foot the bill, and okay, right.
Yep. So he fell out of public attention for some time until the New Yorker magazine published an article titled, "Where Are They Now? April Fools," in their August 14th, 1937 issue. A reporter had tracked down the reclusive Sidis and described his living conditions as one of, quote, Boston's shabby South End. And the writer of the article used a pseudonym at the time. But eventually the writer of that article was identified as, and he said, yeah, that was me. It was the great American humorist James Thurber wrote this article about him for the New Yorker. Sidis went on to sue the New Yorker for invasion of privacy in a case known as Sidis versus FR Publishing Corporation. And you can find that in volume 113 of the Federal Reporter, second series, page 806. The defendants moved to dismiss, which was affirmed at the district court level, so he appealed to the circuit court level. So the defendant said, no, this is nonsense. We didn't invade his privacy. And the circuit court was quoted as saying this: the article is relentless in its dissection of intimate details of its subject's personal life. And in this company with elaborate accounts of Sidis's passion for privacy and the pitiable lengths to which he has gone in order to avoid public scrutiny. The work poses great interest, for it is both amusing and instructive, but it may be fairly described as a ruthless exposure of a once public character who has since sought and been deprived of the seclusion of private life. Legal scholar Rodney Smalla uses the term psychic trespass for this. It's not a physical trespass of your being. It is, in fact, in many ways, it's worse. It is more than, quote, mere outrage at the message. It is the fact that your very nature of your most personal and private life has been violated. So ultimately, the finding was that the magazine article published by the New Yorker did not violate his privacy. The U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit finds that Sidis' early status as a public figure in conjunction with public interest overrides his privacy concerns. His appeal for invasion of privacy fails. He was a public figure at a young age and remains so as a middle-aged man. William James Sidis died July 17th, 1944, at the age of 46. Most likely cause of death, a cerebral hemorrhage. So, with this case, as I understand it, and it's been a long time since I looked at this case, but what it does is it establishes further guides for the distinction between public and private figures in the area of libel and privacy law. For a long time, public officials were the only type of people who had a greater standard to prove invasion of privacy and proof of libel. But this says that there are certain public figures who are as well, who are not public officials, folks who are of a public interest, even if they did so as a kid. This topic will be further explored in cases such as New York Times versus Sullivan, and that's the big case in 1964. I'll give you the sources, and then I kind of want to talk about the story a little bit. Globalfreedomofexpression.columbia.edu. Rodney Small's excellent 1992 book, Free Speech in an Open Society, from Vintage Books in New York. Sidis.net. My vague memories of teaching mass communication law 20 years ago, and my own vague lecture notes, and Wikipedia for basic information on Sidis's life. So what do you think, Bryan? What do you think about William J. Sidis and his strive for privacy?
I'm pretty sympathetic to it, I guess. I mean, I've always gotten how some public figures, some celebrities, I can't think of an example right off the top of my head of someone who is sort of known for being aggressive with people that invade their space. But obviously there have been numerous examples, and I've always been sort of, sympathetic to them as well. If you're, George Clooney, whoever, pick a celebrity, and you can't walk from your house to your car without having a camera jammed in your face, and then the cameraman gets tripped or shoved or something, I'm sorry, but tough shit. This guy seems like he was, striving like crazy to be out of the public eye. The guy's got some rights. You can't just, Macaulay Culkin is sort of the famous, 20th century reference point of someone who was, sort of tragically famous at a very, very young age, and then he's been hectored ever since. It's like, leave the guy alone. Yeah, he probably has all kinds of emotional, developmental problems and mental health issues by virtue of the fact that the people fucking stalk him from the age of 8. So, I don't know. This whole what's in the public's interest and the public has the right to know always seemed a little iffy to me. Slippery slope.
And it's tough when there's a case to be made for someone who is an actor or a performer or a professional sports athlete. Yeah, you're kind of doing that voluntarily, right? You are entering the life knowing that you're going to be in the limelight. This guy doesn't want the limelight, never wanted it, wanted to be left alone. That's all he ever wanted, really. From the earliest age of 14, he says, I want to live a life of seclusion. Yeah, kindly fuck off. And he's not permitted that. He's permitted that for a while, right? Because other things happen. The Great Depression happens, right? A huge chunk of that is the Great Depression hits a few years after he's last spotted, and other things are kind of taking importance. But late 37 rolls around, and hey, whatever happened to that kid who did this or did that? And one of the things that, because I wrote this story a couple of weeks back before everything happened with Fox, of course, but one of the things that I question now is we've expanded what it means to be a person so much to the point where, this whole idea of proving actual malice, one of the things that it's a lot easier for a private figure to prove actual malice in a court of law than a public figure or a public official.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lower standard because, but this poor guy, I don't think even a court today, I don't know what would have happened to him in a court today if he'd brought his case up. I'm thinking he would be told to kick rocks, and it would probably be the same result.
Right. Yeah, exactly. This whole I don't know, this alleged greater good. And, yeah, come on. I mean, this country supposedly is based on individual rights and individual freedom. And so we're all now being held hostage by this imagined greater good that we're supposed to now serve. Who's benefiting from that? Is anyone benefiting? I mean, I don't get it.
And it also gets back to the, where's privacy in the Constitution? Where does it show
Right.
up? Who says it exists? And we're in a day and age where, Citizens United, the case of Citizens United says
Right.
corporations are people. No, they're not people. They're fucking not. They're
Right.
not. And I don't know. I've been thinking, I've wanted to do this story since we decided to do the podcast, and I wanted to save it, and this seemed the right time to bring it out. And then I wrote it, and then the Fox thing happened. And I'm like, oh, perfect, good. A libel
Right.
case that's out in the limelight. I'm not sure how I feel about the Fox decision. I know that you're angry about it. I'm concerned that the whole idea that we are going to pay for it through our taxes, because some of it is a tax write-off for them,
Right.
the
Sure.
hundreds of millions of dollars pisses me off. But at the same time, actual malice is so hard to prove. I'm wondering if them losing it would set us up in a situation where it makes easier for bad actors who are legitimately bad folks
Mm-hmm.
to get away with charging folks with libel when it doesn't occur. That we have cases down the line where we're going to whittle away at the protections afforded under the First Amendment to institutions who do good work about people who have criminal behavior, and make it that much easier for libel, lower that standard for libel. I just don't know how I feel about it. It's an incredibly complicated case for me. I don't
Right.
think it's nearly as easy as Fox needs to be punished. Because I was disappointed when I first heard about it, but then as I kind of took a longer view, I thought, well, man, if it protects Fox, it should protect it could protect good news gathering institutions too. So,
Well, I mean, it's a virtual certainty that, I mean, any laws, any whatever, and any guidelines are going to be abused. I guarantee you. Folks are sued wrongfully, needlessly, all the time. But how often do you sue someone for in a civil suit, and they settle for nearly $800 million? That's a shitload of wrongdoing. But
yep.
I mean, they can. I mean, obviously, good old Tucker's been fired now, so he didn't really have much of a chance to go back on TV and gloat and basically say, all right, we washed our hands of that one, all good. And then, do the spin that they always do, because all those records were quashed and no one can actually speak to it. And there was no on-air apology. So, it does just sort of keep going. But, that's a lot of fucking money to have to fork out. But it does lower the bar. I mean, you are still, I mean, entities like Fox News and folks that are willingly and gleefully engaging in wrongdoing, their feet aren't being held to the fire, really.
Nope. But the Smartmatic case is right around the corner.
And that's whatever, 2.6 billion.
Yeah.
Right.
So,
and hopefully they won't. I mean, I guarantee, I mean, I understand the motivation of any corporate entity when you have stockholders that making money is still, I mean, you want to do the right thing, maybe you do, but if Fox comes and says, okay, $2 billion, how it's hard for, if you're a CEO or CFO or on the board of directors for Smartmatic and they offer a huge chunk of change, you still have to answer to your stockholders. And that's going to be a hard, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me in the least if there's another nearly whatever $1 billion settlement on Smartmatic, even though they'll have all the benefit of what's just happened in the Dominion case. So it'll happen again, and these asswives, Maria Bartiromo and all the rest of them will go on TV and say, "Oh, good, yeah, nothing bad happened."
yeah. And I really want it to be like that episode of Simpsons where Chief Wiggum gets his tie caught in the hot dog roller and his face is getting pulled further and further to it. And he says, this is going to get worse before it gets better. I think it's going to be the same result. It's just a matter of, is it going to be higher than what Dominion settled for or much lower? Because I think Smartmatic at this point, I mean, are you playing on house money at this point? Can you be guaranteed that kind of settlement? I don't know.
Hopefully someone with Smartmatic has been given carte blanche to just do what they want. And they have to feel confident of, for a win, but just, fucking insist that there is some sort of public apology, or maybe just lay your cards down and let it play out the way it's going to play out. No settlement. And even if we walk away with zero, we own all this shit on the public record, regardless of what happens, because we know that there are going to be a billion other plaintiffs after us who will benefit from all this discovery and all the horseshit these fuckers spew over and over again. But I get it. I get how folks, if you're an early investor in Smartmatic and Rupert comes on and is willing to write a check. Like, geez, I spent whatever, I spent $100,000 on stock back whenever the fuck this company started, and I can walk away with 10x, 20x, whatever X. That's hard to say no to. But
as we get towards that in this case, because they said the case is going to start, I think, in a year. I can't remember when.
Is it that far out? Really?
I thought that's what they said. There's so many cases involving these folks that who knows. Right. Save a little thought for William Sidis and what he went through almost 100 years ago, right? With the price he paid, right? The price this poor guy paid, because I have a feeling that cerebral hemorrhage wasn't necessarily, he might have gone a few more years without it.
It could have been stress induced.
Yeah. So there you go. The strange case of perhaps the smartest man who ever lived, William J. Sidis, and his status as a public figure and libel law in America.
Yeah, very cool. All Super right. Interesting. Yeah, good stuff. And he died at an age, I mean, he's younger than either one of us. So
Yep.
That's alarming.
But it was his fault because he's smarter than us. So
right.
Wait, what?
Something like that.
That's not right.
Okay. So I'm punting on a curse word this week because I was suspicious that your story might be a little longer than average. I knew that mine was as well.
Well, Bryan, since you're going to punt, I'll take that punt and I'll return it. I'll take care of the curse word of the week this week.
It's time for the Dream Idiot's curse word of the week.
Okay, got it.
And going through all the old photos and seeing my dad, my mom, and all these old photos, I want to tell you about a pair of curse words my dad used to use. Frig and frump.
Frig and frump.
Okay. Frig and frump, F-R-O-M-P, and then frig is F-R. Do you know what these mean? Frig and frump.
Well, frig is we talked a long time ago about minced oaths. So frig, in my mind, is the cleaned up version, is the mother fudger version of fuck. Kind of, but frump, okay. I don't know.
That's not how my dad uses it, and I think this is something that he and his friends used. And maybe his cousins when they're growing up. Frig and frump. Now, here's the thing. All frumps are frigs, but not all frigs are frumps. Here's why. A frig is someone who, while immersed in a body of water, say a pool or a lake or a bathtub, passes gas. Someone who farts in a bathtub. Right? A frump is someone who farts in a bathtub, but then bites the bubbles as they come up. So my dad, when someone would make a horrible mistake, or like someone would miss an easy catch in a football game and just, totally miss it, he would throw his drink down in disgust and say, what a frump. That was, and one day he finally explained, well, it's real simple. So here's what a frig is, and here's what a frump is. Everybody's a frig. Don't be a frump. So there you have it. Your curse word of the week.
A frump. That's not unlike the expression of I forget where I heard this before, but Someone once said that there's a subtle but important distinction between peeing in the pool and peeing into the pool.
Yeah. Yes, exactly. All right. There you go. Frag and Fromp. First words of the
Awesome.
week.
So I have a story for you that you may. This is a recent news story, and you may have caught wind of it. It's gotten a little bit of press coverage, and I was kind of holding back on this a little bit, but here we go. We're going to talk about three individuals here to start, and we're going to the fabulous state of Florida, Tampa area, a town called Tarpon Springs, Florida. First of all, Dr. Tomasz Roman Kosowski. Kosowski is a Polish-born American, immigrated here as a child with his family, I believe. By all accounts, the guy is super smart, known to be a nice guy. He has his walls are covered with lots of impressive degrees. Attended Dartmouth College, winds up when we're talking to him now, working as a plastic surgeon in Florida. So douchey vibe. He had colleagues in Florida named Dr. Magic Mike and Dr. Level Up. He lived in a $1.3 million house on the water in Tarpon Springs. A friend who was a medical school roommate of Kosowski said, quote, "I've never seen him cranky, let alone angry. When I was despondent over my wife leaving me and my first divorce, Tom was the first person who made sure I ate, called to check on me," unquote. Another med school friend of Kosowski said he was happy, kind of goofy, silly, informal. So this guy's probably pretty introverted, probably fairly bad with women. And as far as I can tell, no one mentions relationships at all, in this guy's adult life. That's person number one, Dr. Tomasz Kosowski. Person number two is Jake Pillsbury. Jake is an attorney, works in a variety of areas. For the purposes of this story, he's doing a little bit of business law, which is kind of outside his typical focus area. But as we'll see here shortly, he's kind of working on this case as a personal favor to a friend of his who's another attorney who had to drop out of the case. And we'll dive more into Jake Pillsbury as this story progresses. Person number three is Stephen Cozzi. I'm hoping I'm pronouncing his name correct. Cozzi. Cozzi. Cozzi is also an attorney, very smart dude, incredibly highly regarded. He's married in 2021 to his husband, Michael. At the time of this story, I believe Cozzi is very early 40s, 41, 42. Does a lot of pro bono work. He has a huge raft of happy clients, positive reviews online, works in a variety of fields, but does work a lot with just individuals and small businesses. He's one of those guys who posts online fundraisers for his birthday, and he'd like to raise money for the local legal aid fund. At least my very, very nominal experience with what legal aid funds do, I think, at least in Texas, they typically raise money for victims of domestic abuse to help with legal issues and restraining orders and custody issues and those types of things. So by all account, Stephen Cozzi, great guy, great attorney, capable, well-loved, well-respected. So we're going to give you some context on Kosowski here, and we're skipping ahead a little bit in terms of chronology. Going forward up to 2021, January 21, a civil complaint is filed in Pinellas County Circuit Court by a patient of Dr. Kosowski's. She is 19 years old, or she's 19 years old in 2019. And Dr. Sorry, I'm reading ahead and laughing already. Kosowski DM'd her on Instagram, just out of the blue. Didn't know her, but he slid into her DMs on Instagram. By the way, Dr. Kosowski's Instagram account name is Dr. Tampa Bay 69. He he wasn't born in 69, so you can fill in the blank there. And he's offering this 19-year-old a discounted BBL. You know what a BBL is?
Does it have to do with breasts, Brian?
No, it does not, actually.
Oh, okay. No, I don't know what that is.
A discounted BBL. BBL stands for Brazilian butt lift.
Okay.
So,
All right. Okay.
Yeah. So gross. Just fucking. I mean, the only way this would be grosser would be if this girl was 16. But okay, 19. She's an adult. Anyway, so she goes, checks out Kosowski's profile online, and actually goes. I mean, this tactic apparently works. Goes in and she schedules a consultation with him at his medical practice. Goes in. He tells her, "Yeah, you're a great candidate for the BBL." He's not board certified in this area.
Oh God.
The young woman, he asked her to provide pictures to him of celebrities who she wanted to resemble. So she's walking in there with photos of Kim Kardashian. I don't know. And
Richard Nixon, Richard
Richard Dawson, and no. She follows a suit because it's clear that he's not qualified to really do this, and he can't realistically or safely model her body the way that she really wanted. So a source with direct knowledge of this case said, quote, "It was a disaster. And by the way, it's weird how a doctor would be soliciting a 19-year-old girl for surgery online," unquote. Like, yeah. So that's creepy and disgusting. One of his specialties was breast augmentation, to your point a moment ago. So this gives you kind of an idea of who this guy really is. I mean, speculating here, but I'm assuming this might be the only way he's able to see women naked, but I'm just guessing there. So rewinding slightly, the complaint that is the basis of this story, there's a lawsuit that Kosowski files in 2019. Kosowski claims that there are a number of errors by his former employer's insurance biller. And so I'm sure you've dealt with, just having lived as long as you have lived, you've dealt with insurance companies and doctors' offices and billing bullshit and all the nonsense that goes into that process. Wildly complex. You have to have a PhD to wrap your brain around all of that insanity. And so the complexities and vagaries of his employer and this separate insurance biller, in his mind, provokes a series of damaging online reviews for him. And at least one person, apparently just in protest, was a cancer patient who came to him after cancer treatment to do some touch-up, cleanup, whatever, to improve his or her appearance after a cancer treatment, and refers to Kosowski as being a complete butcher.
Ooh.
By virtue of the these billing issues, problems, I don't quite understand. It's not really spelled out in research I read how there's a direct correlation between these errors or problems and it impacting his reputation. But he's claiming that his rep has been obliterated and his income has dropped off by $50,000 a month. So he's losing money. So Stephen Cozy, who I mentioned, Cozy's been on this case since the very beginning. Pillsbury comes in a little bit later on to replace his friend as an attorney. Cozy is defending the medical practice, the actual office where Kosowski worked, and Pillsbury's defending the medical biller that Kosowski blamed for all of his problems. This case should have been very, very straightforward, but Kosowski just apparently really seemed to enjoy making things as difficult and as confrontational as possible. Things got increasingly contentious over time, and Pillsbury indicated after the fact that he developed just this intense dislike for Kosowski, and not even because he was on the other side of the lawsuit. By virtue of, I've been around long enough to know that there are plenty of legal actions that proceed, and everything's essentially polite because you're not the actual interested parties. You're just the attorneys for these interested parties. And so it's not like there is this, nastiness. You're just trying to hammer out a legal dispute, especially in a civil case. It's mostly non-emotional.
So just to clarify for my own sake, Kosowski and his team are on one side, and the other side consists of Pillsbury representing the billing agency, and Cozy is representing Kosowski's former employers.
Correct.
Okay. All
Yeah,
right.
that's
Gotcha.
that's exactly correct. Pillsbury goes on to say and said we didn't like him because of just how awful he was. Pillsbury would go on to say, and this is my source for this is there's several places where it's talked about. My principal source is the Daily Beast. Pillsbury says in this article, quote, "I've represented some people accused of some pretty terrible things, and I've become pretty good at identifying people who are dangerous, and I was concerned about this guy pretty early on." Kosowski, I mean, the dude is smart, but no surprise, he wouldn't hire an attorney. The guy's making good money, but he wouldn't hire an attorney. He did it all himself because he always has to be the smartest person in the room. So, as an aside here, I mean, I should say that I have been in the room for lots and lots of depositions over the years, a million years ago, and you probably don't recall this. I did video recordings for law firms.
No, I remember that. Yeah.
Okay. And so, the vast majority of these things are dull as paste. It means watching paint dry. But there are rules that are involved, rules of civil procedure. And Kosowski doesn't, and lots of people who have high IQs don't understand or appreciate that there is a difference, a subtle difference between being smart and being knowledgeable. He's a smart guy, but he's not an attorney. He doesn't understand the rules of how a deposition is run or how a court case is run, and so he thinks that he should or could or should be allowed to do whatever the fuck he wants and ask anything he wants. So he's basically pissed off that he thought that everything about this case is going slower than it should, and he just comes off as being more and more combative all the time because everything he's doing because he's doing it badly, doing it wrong, is being questioned, and there are objections being raised because he's doing it all fucking wrong. I was in a deposition one time when I was doing these video recordings. They were, the guy being deposed was a plumber. They were talking about the source of a leak that may have caused damage. And the question was brought up, not intended to be controversial, because it's not controversial, that water flows downhill. We could pretty much all agree on that one. So it shouldn't have been contentious, but one opposing attorney decided to raise an objection to that and said, are you where in the Bible of, somewhere in the Old Testament in the fucking book of Ezekiel or something where the River Nile runs uphill? The attorney that hired me objects and says, irrelevant or outside the scope of the, whatever, raises an objection, but he keeps pushing this point. We go off the record. I stop the recording, and the attorney, looks at the guy who's raising up this biblical question. It's like, huh? What the hell are you doing? This makes no sense. And you really want all this crap on the record? This guy is a plumber. That's what he's here to talk about. That's his official capacity. He's not a religious leader. He's not a theologian. He's not a personal advisor to someone on death row. What the hell are you doing? He's a plumber. So you can't just go off the rails and ask anyone you want. If I'm deposing you and you're an expert witness in your field, I can't ask you, can you tell me about your last arrest, or can you tell me when you stopped beating your wife? That's against the rules. And so,
but what about circus clowns, Bryan? What about, do they scare you? What does this have to do with water?
Tell me about your dreams. Like, oh God. So he's pissed off and being aggressive about everything. Beginning of this year, 2023, Kosowski's lawsuit is still not being resolved. He's getting increasingly frustrated. Kosowski accuses both Cozy and Pillsbury of slow walking things, just adding billable hours, trying to bring the process to just slow it way down. He tries to get Cozy sanctioned and then booted from the case, files a motion accusing Cozy of having violated professional standards, calls him a liar. He refused to give him documentation he had been requesting. He says at one point, quote, Mr. Cozy's obstruction to plaintiff's access to evidence is unlawful, and one of the main reasons this trial is now in its fourth year and still fraught with unresolved discovery disputes.
Fourth year.
Because I mean, lawsuits take, I don't know why they take forever, but they take a long time. I don't know. I mean, for all I know, maybe his complaint is legit in terms of Cozy slowing it down. I don't know, but you'll see how this plays out. So both sides go back and forth. Cozy's now arguing that it's Kosowski who should be punished for questioning Cozy's integrity. He says, rightly so, that Kosowski doesn't understand legal procedure, and that he's simply filing redundant calls for information he's already been given, or he's asking for things that don't exist, or he's asking for things he doesn't actually have any right to see. So as this is going further and further along, Kosowski's getting more and more amped up. January 26th of this year, Pillsbury says, this is the event where things really began to turn ugly. Kosowski is says in this article, mercilessly grilling an office worker from his old practice, and he basically spends 3 hours dissecting this woman, just tearing her apart. And this is a woman who is a medical biller. She works back in some cubicle somewhere, and she's not that knowledgeable, but he just tears her apart. And Pillsbury, indicates later that she's not really central to this case. He says, quote, she was being beat up in this deposition, and not in a way that made a lot of sense. It was hard to watch from a human perspective because it was just so unnecessary. Pillsbury and Cozy both had to stop Kosowski, quote, multiple times, that this is not a trial, and had to cut in on the proceeding to keep things moving along, because Kosowski would just keep pounding away, and he was, quote, very unhappy with all of the objections. So during a break in testimony, Kosowski actually gets up, follows Cozy to the bathroom and confronts him in the bathroom. They have a little verbal spat in the bathroom, but it's not known what's actually said. Things continue to not go Kosowski's way because he's not a fucking attorney. Some rulings are set aside that had originally been ruled in his favor. March 20th of this year, Kosowski is even more frustrated and writes to the judge in the case, and he's basically bitching about the latest batch of materials he'd been given as part of discovery, saying that they had, quote, hastily prepared tripe, which failed to provide good faith answers. That was March 20th of this year. And then I'm going to read to you an excerpt.
Have the judge take it.
I'm going to read to you an excerpt from an arrest affidavit. And this is verbatim. When officers arrived, they discovered that the only unsecured entrance to the building were the main lobby doors that were monitored by external surveillance. While reviewing surveillance, officers learned that a gray Toyota Tundra arrived at the office building at 8:32. At 8:34, an unidentified white male is seen entering the building wearing gloves, carrying a large box, and wearing a large backpack. Shortly after the victim arrives at the building, the victim, we will discover, is Cozy, arrives at the building at 8:37 wearing a red sweater. At 10:22, the subject, who has a similar build to the first subject wearing the same backpack, exits the building and appears to have changed clothes. He is seen pulling behind them a large cart that appears to be heavy and have a red bag or blanket. It should be noted that the subject struggled with the weight of the cart while transporting it to the Toyota Tundra. The victim, Cozy, missed a 10:30 telephonic court hearing that was supposed to be held with the defendant. The defendant attended the telephonic hearing from 10:28 to 11:04. As soon as the defendant disconnects from the court hearing, video captures the subject at the crime scene beginning to move again. Specifically, at 11:05, the subject is seen repositioning the cart by the Tundra. The subject is later seen struggling to get the heavy cart into the bed of the truck on surveillance. The victim is never seen exiting the business on surveillance. Forensics processed the scene and discovered a large quantity of blood that had been cleaned up from the bathroom floor.
Oh, God.
The blood smears were positive using a presumptive test. Positive for what? I don't know. White fibers were also located in the bathroom, as well as the victim's vehicle. A further note is the defendant's left index fingerprint is located on scene in the breaker room for the office building, which is not in an area normally accessed by the public. So what happens is Kosowski finally snaps. He goes to the office. This surveillance shows Kosowski sneaking into the building before Cozy gets there. Apparently, he hides out, and I will say allegedly, hides out in some area because his fingerprint is found on this breaker box after the fact. Having already had a verbal confrontation with Cozy in this bathroom some days earlier, he knows where to go. Hangs out in the bathroom, and then something awful happens. And Cozy is presumably killed and thrown into this cart. When Kosowski is arrested, police find, among other things, a bag of masks, duct tape, brass knuckles, a taser, a ballistic vest with a substantial amount of blood on it, for some reason, 280 grand in cash, and intravenous sedatives, namely a drug called succinylcholine, which is a paralytic. And then a subsequent search of his house, by virtue there's a risk protection order put in place from the sheriff's office. They go to his house, and Kosowski owned upwards of 200 handguns and rifles, and had thousands of rounds of ammunition in his house. So he has this conversation with Cozy in this bathroom, allegedly kills him, pushes him out in this cart to his truck, loads him, awkwardly and has difficulty loading him into his truck, is seen on surveillance opening his laptop, attending this hearing where everyone sits around and wonder where Cozy is. Well, shit, signs off the Zoom call, and then proceeds to drive away, presumably with Cozy in the back of his car. I remember learning, 20 years ago, that if you live in any sort of populated area, that you were picked up on something like 12 or 15 cameras every single day. I'm sure now, unless you live in, Beaver Lake, Alabama, I mean, you must be, caught on 30 cameras, 50 cameras a day. I have no idea. But this guy lost his mind so much, went to this office and killed this poor guy. And Kosowski, they have not found Stephen Cozy's body. Don't know where he is. But Kosowski now is in county jail on charges of first-degree murder and is facing the death penalty, even though they have no body. So one of Cozy's, another attorney in the Tampa area said, I've been an attorney for a long period of time. I have never seen a case that actually moved faster when you murdered one of the attorneys. Like, dude, what are you thinking? What's your plan here?
And you know that when he signed on to that Zoom meeting, he was like, "This is what I'm talking about. They're slow. He's not showing up for meetings. He was just a total asshole about it. That's what he did."
Here we go again. Yeah, he's
exactly.
And his dead body is 3 feet behind you.
Same shit, different day with him. It's just oh, what a jerk.
So it's tragic for this obviously stupendous human being who was just doing his fucking job and ran into a complete sociopath. And hopefully this guy, I'm pretty rabidly opposed to the death penalty, but I'm willing to make the occasional exception.
Well, he's a menace.
Right. Yeah.
It's just, what the hell? Sowing seeds of chaos wherever he goes.
Yeah, pretty awful. Anyway, so tragic story, but had some sort of funny elements of a complete lunatic. And we might follow the story and see how it plays out. But much like the Caitlin Armstrong story from months ago, like you didn't really think this through, did you? For a smart person, you didn't really. Didn't really ponder how this might play out.
The easy joke to say is only in Florida, but that's not the case anymore. Right. Maybe there's a greater preponderance of it in Florida, but Unbelievable.
Yeah.
No, I had not heard of this at all, Brian.
Okay, it's I've been sort of following it from you because I heard about it when it first happened. I was like, what happened? Like, yeah, God, psycho.
And I wonder, the judge in the case that had to put up with all this nonsense. I mean, what do those guys do? And ladies do when they have guys like this who are just, I mean, do they just roll their eyes like, oh, God, here we go again? I mean, they've got
Yeah,
power in the court to, sir, I highly recommend you get an attorney. You know, I mean,
well, I mean, it's like how many? I've watched enough true crime nonsense on TV and on podcasts, and you always, inevitably, there are these ludicrous first degree murder cases where the defendant, oh, I'm going to defend myself, and there's always a judge who's like, okay, I'm going to make a public defender hang out with you just to guide you a little bit, or say, sir, I really encourage you not to do this because you have no idea what you're doing. You really don't want to do this. I mean, it's such a weird case. I mean, I've heard of stories of, there were a couple cases, not anyone I knew, but there were a couple cases in Texas where divorce attorneys would, the attorney would be killed because of, in divorce cases, emotions run high, and there is the spouse, whoever, right? You're working for the wife and you crush the husband loses his shit and blames you personally and comes after you. I get at least the logic of that sort of makes, the logic of emotion makes sense there. I get how you'd be angry if some attorney just, it seems like, fucked you over. But this guy is working like, what? This is complete horseshit. This guy just, gets fucking fried. I mean, I'm sorry, drop dead.
Well, I think it's a manner of, it gets kind of back to the Dunning-Kruger effect stuff that you talked about right. How it's just, well, clearly I'm smart enough to do this in the,
right.
and it's like the first couple times that I tried to do like electrical stuff in my own house, it just took one or two tries to make me realize that, yeah, this is not no, I didn't shock myself because I'm too like scared of getting burned for that. But when I flip the power back on and suddenly nothing works, it's like, oh
yeah,
clearly I am not built for this kind of work. Or just stuff like, there's certain things I can fix on my car and certain things where I'm like, this is beyond me. I don't need to mess with this. Bad things are going to happen if I try to mess with this. Just
right, and this guy, right, and this guy. I mean, not that. I mean, I don't think this has ever happened besides in movies, but that whole situation when the pilot has slumped at the controls, and someone comes on and says, "Is there someone else on the plane who's a pilot who could fly this?" This asshole would raise his hand. It's like, oh yeah, I'm a plastic surgeon, so therefore I'm qualified to do this too, right? Yeah, doctor, sit down.
Did you stay at a Holiday Inn Express? Yes, I did. Shut the fuck up and sit the fuck down.
Anyway, thank you, Florida, for offering us so much delicious goodness.
Well, and once again, the confluence of the legal of our stories come together in the legal world. In this case, no pun intended, for this week's episode of Dream Idiots. All right, feels good to be back in the saddle.
We're here, and we're here for the long haul, I think. Thanks for listening, folks. Give us 5 stars if you can. Shoot us a review. Like, share, subscribe, post online. Grab your friend's phone and subscribe for them if they haven't already. And thanks for listening and doing those great things for us. We appreciate it.
Yes, indeedly. And until next time, be good to each other.
This is a Rough Tiger production.
Bong bong, Brian.
Bong bong?
Bong bong.
Bong bong. Good.